Eichelberger. He will be running this panel for the next hour, and I will give him the floor to introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I represent the School of Biomedical Engineering. I get to be the person to tell all the amazing stories that come out of our labs, out of our teaching, and out of our student groups, like the one who is putting this on right here. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Amazing. And with that, I think I will pass you the floor and get started with the panel. Thank you guys all for attending, and attendees, if you have any questions during the panel, please use the Q&A function or the chat.
Right, everybody. So let's just start by going around the room and everybody give a quick introduction of who they are. We'll begin with Mark Derlich, please.
Great. Thank you. My name is Mark Derlich. I'm the Director of Program Design for Starfish Medical. Starfish Medical is the largest medical device design consultancy in Canada, one of the bigger players in North America. My role within Starfish is to understand what various clients' constraints may be and try to figure out how Starfish may be of assistance. My background is in mechanical engineering. I graduated in 2002 from UBC and have been working in various high-tech sectors the last 10 years with Starfish. So pleasure to be here.
And Mark? Other Mark?
Yes, hi. So my name is Mark Chilala. I'm a engagement manager at the Montreal office of McKinsey & Company. So McKinsey is a global management consulting firm. I am specifically part and specialize in the pharmaceuticals and medical products practice and their operations practice. So most of my work is in working with medical devices companies when it comes to operations topics, from product design and development to manufacturing, supply chain, network optimization, procurement, etc. Anything really related to how do you take a medical device and get it to the market and manufacture it. My background is in mechanical engineering out of McGill, graduated there, and then I did a master's in biodesign and bioengineering, innovation and design out of Johns Hopkins. I'm pretty excited to be here.
Fantastic. And Stephanie?
In fact, I got a job in August as a consulting biomedical engineer. I'm working for all the hospital of Quebec. I am affiliated by CIUS de la Montérégie. I've worked to offer the Quebec Health and Social Service Network a unit consultation service dedicated to health technology. In fact, there's only years ago, I was at the place of the people that here today. I just received my engineering ring like a year ago. So I'm also kind of newbie in this professional world. I guess I really relate to everybody that's here today. As you can hear, I'm French Canadian, and I'm really nervous to be in front of you and speak to you today. But this is why I chose engineering field, to challenge myself every day. So I'm really glad to be here today.
Oui, bonjour. Okay, so let's start with the whole purpose of this panel. And I'd like to start with Mark, if possible. Can you describe what exactly consulting is, especially when in regards to the biomedical engineering field? You're on mute, Mark.
Which Mark?
Sorry, Mark Derlich. Mark Derlich.
Okay, so we're gonna have to differentiate each other. So consulting is gathering specific expertise outside of your organization for the purposes of either expanding your personnel base or for hiring in specialization that might be specific to your needs or something similar or combination thereof. And so particularly within the medical device space, there is some very specialized knowledge when it comes to regulatory requirements. If it's an electromechanical device, 60601 is a standard, and then navigating the various elements of the regulatory landscape so that your product will be successful at the back end of that. So some of that's engineering and design, some of it's regulatory. That's where Starfish plays, but there are others here too.
And Stephanie and Mark, do you have anything else to add to that too about consulting?
No, I think that what Mark said is pretty much spot on in terms of the kind of expertise that you bring in as a consultant. I'd say what's interesting is that typically in a consulting environment, you are working on new initiatives, new projects, rather than what you would call kind of the business as usual. So we're kind of dedicated capacity for an enterprise to try to develop something new. When many of the employees within the company are typically only assigned 20-30% to a certain project, and they have quite a few other responsibilities to manage at the same time.
Yeah, what's really nice in the consulting field is you always have new challenge. It's different every day. There's no typical day, and you learn everything every day. So that's really nice to work with physicians and like see the impacts of what you're doing concretely on people and doing human engineering stuff. So that's great.
Stephanie, you recently made the switch. What drew you to the consulting side of the field?
In fact, I didn't do a switch. It just I graduated in last December, and before that, I did 3 internships that wasn't a consulting one. I got an opportunity to do consulting. I was a teacher assistant, so my boyfriend is a consulting too. So I say why not, and just go ahead, and I jump in.
And for you guys as well, and Mark, what drew you to the consulting side of the field? You both have mechanical engineering backgrounds as well.
Do you want to go first, Mark?
Sure, I'll go. I mean, for me, I think the experiences I had before, I worked in kind of small and large R&D organizations, which is pretty interesting when it comes to developing a medical device. What I did find, though, is that you were assigned to this one project for the longest amount of time, and you're developing this one feature, and was spending, I guess, maybe more of my time writing documentations for a QMS than actually doing the development. And I found that, from the consulting standpoint, I was actually getting to see different aspects of a project, because I would jump from project to another. So I got to get involved both from, on a product design standpoint, but also on the procurement or on the manufacturing standpoint, the supply chain, different projects, different clients, different ways of working. And you can notice that, in an industry that is regulated like medical devices, there's a lot of things that are standardized, but there's also a lot of things that are very different in terms of the interpretation of how you get a medical device to the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would echo a lot of what you said, Mark. And just from my job past history, I was sort of serially changing every 3 to 5 years in previous jobs, partly because I'd sort of understood everything about the subject matter that existed. And for some people that suits really well. They want to become an expert or rock star at what they're doing. But I really enjoy the process of learning about different technologies, about different ways of solving problems, and how different people work. And so the consulting world offers that in spades. I have no idea what I'm going to be working on 2 years from now. Probably a little bit in 2 weeks, but but not much in the middle. So
it's funny. That's one of the aspects of the biomedical engineering field, right? Is it constantly is changing and evolving in a way that I think allows for that kind of optionality on the consulting side. That's really cool. So this is for the lot of you. We can begin with Stephanie. What does a typical day at work look like for you?
For me, I guess there's no typical day at work, and this is why consulting is so great. Currently, I'm working on 3 different projects. One about the pulmonary function, one about the construction of a temporary COVID hospital in the north of Quebec, and another about changing a physiological monitor in a hospital located in Gaspésie area. So I cannot really stop on one typical day. Every day is changing, and this is why I like it so much.
And Mark Shalala, how about you?
I'd say that my day-to-day has definitely changed in March, and has become a very different. So now it's, I mean, the work itself is still the same, in that it is a lot about working with clients to, first off, start by understanding the context, understanding the situation. Very often we'll start with a diagnostic phase where you'll go into what we call ethnographic research. So you'll do a bunch of interviews with user stakeholders, etc., to understand, what's the problem at hand, and then you kind of develop a solution from there. A lot of that time is spent again in workshops, in meetings, and in also doing research, connecting with experts in the fields, doing your own analysis to back it up. All of that used to be more so in person. Now it's all kind of moved to an online Zoom environment, which means that although I have become more local, I no longer travel, my work has become a lot more global. I've had some Zoom meetings with people across 4 or 5 different time zones. So what's interesting is that a lot of it is very human facing and about interactions with other people.
And a typical day for me, I'll actually answer the question just a little bit different, because I'll talk about the typical day for most engineers at Starfish. So we have about 100 engineers right now working on about 30 or so projects at any given time. And so for each of those people, they're typically working on 1 to 3 projects. And so you're often task switching between one program to another, solving specific problems that exist in there as needed. And so I think that variety comes from a consulting nature, or the nature of a consulting business, I should say. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, so then, out of curiosity, for those people with a burgeoning interest in pursuing consulting, especially in the biomedical engineering, how does one do that? How does one step out of their degree, step out of the lab into a consulting career? Anybody?
I would say, sorry, it's not dissimilar to finding any other job. If you have subject matter expertise in the area that you're looking to get into, and you have some expertise in a specific area, let's say if you know a lot about one type of medical device, those are all good things to bring forth for an interview. So it's a matter of just applying, trying to figure out how to position yourself within that organization. A consulting firm is not that much different than others. And then, if you have any expertise or extracurricular activities, those are things to certainly highlight throughout the hiring process.
But I'll maybe say, Stephanie.
I guess LinkedIn is honestly your best friend when you're looking for a job, any kind. I knew consulting before, but I post on LinkedIn. I try to find some stuff on LinkedIn and speak with people. I guess be proactive is your best help. There's always someone who knows someone who has a need for you, and just don't only search for a job, but be patient and try to get through everything. I think it's really what's helped you to be the most popular one in the interview process.
I maybe answer a bit differently, just because I think the context for us at McKinsey is a bit different. I mean, unlike, I think, Starfish, we're not a dedicated medical devices consulting firm. It's more of a general management consulting in general. And for many people coming out of school, if they are to apply to McKinsey, they will go into what is called the generalist track. So you won't be hired to join a specific practice or specific industry, but more so to try and do projects about across the board. So you may end up doing things that are not in bioengineering and not in medical devices. I've gone through that route. I think I have been very deliberate in trying to focus myself into the field that I had developed experience in before. And so I guess I do echo what Mark says. Coming in with a certain set of experience will allow you to kind of shape your path in consulting a bit more, just given that it is a broader field. I think I've seen also on the chat a couple of questions about that as to whether I recommend going into industry before doing consulting. I think it's definitely a good idea. It's not necessarily a requirement, or alternatively is to do a master's. But in my personal experience, coming with experience in the medical devices development process, understanding the regulatory environment, understanding how this works, helped me a lot more try to get on those projects that were of interest to me in that industry, rather than just do what we call the random walk and end up on mining and energy and banking projects, etc. So in my context specifically, I would say that yes, this industry experience would definitely help you kind of take charge of the types of projects that you're on a bit more easily.
Quick question about that. On that front, do you find that you have a lot of control, or you can at the very least create an environment in which you can make which you can control which projects you take part in or which projects you pursue?
I mean, so the way it'll work at our firm, at least, is that at the very beginning, staffing is directive. So you are helped by a staffer to get on a variety of projects, and the goal is to do a variety of projects, to try strategy, to try operations, to try marketing and sales, to try different industries, so that you can tend to figure out what it is that you like. As you develop a bit of that basic toolkit, then you can start having a bit more selection into your projects, and then there you can leverage any sort of prior experience that you have to present your profile in a way that is a good fit for a certain project.
I think showing interest in specific areas, I have a personal story in that one of the reasons that I went into medical device design was for oncology related, just family history of cancer. And so projects that relate to that strongly motivate me, and I let my boss know that. I said, if there's a project, I don't care if I'm a fly on the wall and I'm taking notes. I want to be on a project that's involved with these types of programs and organizations. And timing and projects and what's coming through the door obviously have a heavy influence on what opportunities become available. And by chance, I think about 4 months after I started, I was walking into the BC Cancer building and getting engaged with a project, not quite as a fly on the wall, but rather maybe I could have been doing something more technical. But it didn't matter to me because I followed what my passions were, and I ended up being more, I think, useful and productive in that program or project because of it.
In the opposite way, like at first I was really focused on the heart. Like my passion was product on the heart. I went do my last internship in France, and I worked for Medtronic France on the TAVI, and I really like this job. In fact, it's one of my dream job. But when I accept the job as a consulting, what I really like, I said to my boss that I really like the heart, but he tried to give me some other project on other field. So I discovered, oh yeah, that's really nice, the pulmonary function too, and that's really nice, the liver too. And so I get my horizon really open more. And I think for me that I discovered a new passion, and that was really great too.
Now, with that, this is very interesting to me that you guys have both, all three of you have spoken about how the optionality of the field is really what drove you to it and what you really enjoy about it. Are there any other specific pros to being a consultant and any specific cons to being a consultant in the biomedical engineering field? And we can start with you, Stephanie.
In fact, what I really like, as I said, it's different every day for me, so I really appreciate this. For me, maybe I'm working a little bit different than both of you guys. In fact, I'm working on public field, so I'm more doing the quotation and try to help the need of a physician and choose which company will enter the product into this specific hospital. So I really like that I met new physician, I will meet new one. So that's really great. The cons, I think it's each physician that I'm working with has his own jargon. So they think I know all of their stuff and specific stuff. So because I'm not in a specific field, sometimes I'm a little bit lost between the different health fields. So that's maybe counts.
And Mark Shalala, how about you?
I'd say maybe the biggest con is that you don't have the ownership of the end product at the end of the day, right? You are helping someone else develop or bring a product to the market. You are pretty much in the background there, and you're only helping with a specific portion, which it's also kind of a pro, right? I get to jump across different areas of the value chain, but sometimes you're just so invested in something, you're like, I just want to see this through to the end, when you can't really do that. I'd say like maybe that's one thing. I think the second is for some people, what they prefer becoming is kind of a subject matter expert. You want to be at the forefront of, let's say, GI endoscopy, and want to come up with patents and invent things, etc. I'd say in a consulting environment, you have the potential to kind of invent things and get your names on patents with your clients, but you're more likely to be jumping around areas. And again, so if you're more of the type of person that wants to research something and see it through till the end, I think that's maybe a con.
Yeah, and I would for the pros for me are generally companies that are looking to engage with the consulting firm at the peak of something. They have a large fundraise, a little bit of backing behind their idea, but there's still a gap to get to a commercial product. And so that's the most exciting time of any company's life cycle, and that's the entire cycle that I typically live in on a day-to-day basis, which is awesome. But it's on the cons, it's not for everybody, right? So there's a fair bit of pressure, and various people are going to have some dynamics and needs that are either fully communicated or not, and you need to be able to figure that out and adapt to those changing constraints. Businesses change at the exciting times that they're working through their final pushes to get their devices to market, whether that be funding or timeline, or there's some big technical challenge that really needs to be resolved in order for the device to be successful. And so that's the world that we live in consulting, and it can be stressful at times. And it changes a little bit from time to time as well. So yeah, I think that's a double-edged sword associated with consulting, and where I see the pros and cons. I love it, but it's not for everybody.
Well, let's dig a little bit deeper into that. Like everybody's opinion. What do you think are, say, like 3 key traits for somebody who is interested in getting into the field, or more importantly, how they can decide whether or not they're interested in getting into the field? Something that you think is integral to success as a consultant.
Good one. I think so. I think we talked a bit about adaptability here in the variety, so I won't talk too much about that. I think one of the key aspects to success is being a self-starter, a self-motivated person, because consulting, you are often directed or in the face of somebody that's the CEO of the company that you're engaging with, or at a fairly high level. Not necessarily with the support of the CEO in your own consulting firm, maybe at times, but you have to be comfortable in those situations. And I think part of that is to be self-motivated in order to want and desire the responsibility to be able to execute on those things.
Stephanie, what do you think?
I think if I were
go, Mark. I will answer after.
Sure. I would say if you maybe 3 traits or things that I think are pretty critical for consulting, I'd say, number 1, you got to be good with teamwork and good with working with people that are going to be different at every project. So you're probably not going to be working with the same team or the same boss or the same setup or even the same client, right, from a project to another. Which leads me kind of to the second one is you should be able to deal with ambiguity. You might start a project and find out that the timeline is X, but then you realize that the data that you're trying to get is unavailable, or that there's some other issues as you dig deeper with the client that needs you to change your scope, change your way of working, and try to problem solve other ways of attacking the problem. So sometimes, yeah, things are not as clear, and you need to kind of clarify them as you go. And so the third one is kind of need to be entrepreneurial. So not necessarily just wait for instructions to come down, but try and go and test some things out, put out some hypotheses and run the analysis and try to take initiative to push the problem.
And I will add to that. I need, indeed you need to be really proactive. Yeah, you have a boss, but he's not always over your shoulder. So you need to work on your own timesheet and get with your goal and met them. I think you need to really manage well your stress because, as my colleague said, sometimes it's all at the same times and sometimes it's really calm. So when all the stuff is at the same time, you need to focus on some part of the project and you need to prioritize some stuff. And after that, I guess you really need to be curious because there's a lot of way to work. Every day is always different. And a lot of time you will do 3 steps ahead to go back for 4 steps. So you need to adjust yourself very well according to your clients. So
It sounds like getting comfortable in uncertainty is important, right? Getting comfortable in both being proactive and also being reactive. It's very interesting. So on that topic, when you guys stepped into this field, what was your start like? What did it feel like? Were there surprises? Were there even disappointments or expectations that you brought in? And we can start with you, Marcelala.
So again, I think, you know, joining McKinsey again, you join as a generalist. So very frankly, in my first few projects, I was very confused as to what I was doing there. Had gone from like doing mechanical engineering to my bioengineering masters. You know, worked on a bunch of, you know, spinal surgery and endoscopy devices. Worked with Biosin Scientific, etc. And then I jumped on my first project at McKinsey, and it's a cardboard packaging procurement project for a dairy company, and I'm like, what am I doing here? And so the idea is again that you start with this more generalist thing to try to just get to learn the toolkit, and you do that with the projects that are available locally, with the partners that work locally. And the fact of the matter is, in Montreal, most of our projects are not medical devices. Once I kind of got to learn what that was about, I started kind of leveraging my past experience to get onto those projects that were more exciting to me. And so getting on things like working for a manufacturer of endoscopic devices and a manufacturer of orthopedic devices, and there kind of started to build skill sets that I was kind of using and transferring from one to the other. I'd say specifically for me, given again that Montreal was not necessarily our hub for medical devices, I had to go and actively seek out the work. It meant I was mostly traveling to see clients quite frequently up until, I guess, COVID happened. And then I basically tried to force my way back into the medical devices practice.
How about you, Mark?
So I don't remember what I had for breakfast, Miguel. So I'm thinking about 10 years ago now. I started at Starfish 10 years ago, and the company itself has grown a lot. There was 3 mechanical engineers when I started, and there's about 27 or so now. And so the systems that have come into place since then have supported new hires a lot better than when I started. It was kind of like, here you go, have fun. And so for me, the work has always been good. I've enjoyed that, I say, level of ambiguity, and then the process has been added on since then. But the one difference for me, and some people, particularly if they come from a product company relative to a consulting company, is what is being sold. So in a product company, you're selling a tangible item. You're selling scissors, you're selling syringes, you're selling catheters, you're selling whatever you are. And the value that the company gets is directed by the products that are being sold. In a consulting, you're selling people. You're selling competencies that are ingrained in people's heads and the attitudes by which they're executing things upon, and also hours. So, you know, I wasn't really used to tracking where my efforts were being allocated towards before. And in a consulting firm, that's a big difference. If you are taking a lunch break or you took 15 minutes to chat with your friends in a product company, sometimes those hours weren't necessarily allocated for. In a consulting firm, you have to charge somebody for the time that you're in, or not, but then you're not working and getting paid. So that was a bit of an adjustment to realize where my efficiencies were and were not, and also where I was putting my focus on. And that's translated to other parts of my life, actually. I think it's a good thing. but it was a big change for me.
Stephanie, how about you?
And for me, it was a really weird start because I started remotely in the COVID stuff. So I was a little bit lost. I never met actually my colleague in my office. I never went to my office. So I was really lost at first. And yeah, as you said, Mark, like my boss sell my brain and my knowledge, and I don't even know what I'm supposed to know. So I don't really know what I'm selling or so I start on a COVID project. So I start to buy a few product and few stuff for a temporary hospital in the north of Quebec. So at first I say, okay, I will take a step back and just look what's the product and what's the company that's supposed to work for us. And I did my research and I start here, and finally it's getting the point that, oh, okay, it's exactly what I need to do. And yeah, I called oftenly my colleague to say, sorry, today I really don't know what I'm supposed to do. So can you help me or like guide me, please? So it took me a month to just go on my step and say, okay, now I know what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to do it. So
Yeah. That's good. Well, let's shift gears just a little bit then, and I'd love to hear your guys' take on what you think consulting firms are looking for, especially in an interview process. If I'm going to interview for this job, what do you hope to see? What do you hope to hear? And what are you looking for? And we can start with you, Mark Derlick.
Sure. So I, one of my roles was for about 3 years running the MEC department, so I did a lot of hiring. And so there's a screening process. Once you get through that, then there's typically screening process in that just looking at resumes. And then often there's sort of the purpose of your resume should be to get an interview, in my opinion, nothing else. And then once you have an initial conversation to decide to bring somebody in for a more thorough interview, it's personality, it's work experience, all the things that you would expect. But consulting in medical device is so specialized that there are no people with a deep set of experience in consulting and medical device in Canada. We just have to realize that the pool of people and the talent is fairly limited with consulting and medical device, both of those two together. So then it becomes a trade-off of trying to determine what competencies somebody has, where their skill sets are, what they like to do, and then is there a fit to the organization? Because you need people that are innovators, the people that are going to be able to shape early stage projects and figure out it should be this big or this small. And then you need implementers, the people that are going to translate those ideas into finished products that tick all of the boxes from a manufacturing perspective, from a regulatory perspective. So understanding what you are, what you want to be, where you want to go, or if you're totally open, are all acceptable answers, but those are things that you try to figure out through an interview process. And then it becomes a matter of what the company needs at that time. So sometimes there's an awesome candidate, but we have a lot of innovators or implementators, and then therefore that doesn't work out at that time. So then keeping in touch also makes sense. Consulting firms are a victim of the demands by which customers are going to impose on them, meaning if there's a lot of customers, you hire people, and if there isn't, then you try to retain the population of employees. And if there's a really big downturn, then we look for opportunities to shift things out, or people that are consultants are not working as much within the organization. So just because a consulting firm doesn't hire you that day doesn't mean that they don't want you. It means that they may not have a job at that time.
And Mark?
So I guess for McKinsey, it depends on where you're trying to come in and how. So if you're going to get general McKinsey, right, as a generalist, the interview process is very standardized. So like Mark said, for us as well, the resume is just a means to get you an interview. And then after that, it's a lot about how you perform in the interview. The interview is structured in a very standardized way, where it's one part kind of a personal experience interview, getting to know one of your previous experiences, talking about a specific situation that you were in, to understand a bit how you interact in that situation, how you work on, I guess, teamwork, leadership, impact, etc. And then there's a case component, which is a standard kind of business consulting case crack that you need to crack. And there's a lot of material online for you to prep, etc. Now, if you decide you want to join kind of from a different profile, so not as a generalist business analyst, but more as a data scientist, or for example, I think for people that are on this call, it might be relevant is joining through McKinsey Design and joining as a designer or as a mechanical designer or an industrial designer or an ethnographer. Then you might be asked for a portfolio of works that you've done before. There may be a technical component to the interview, depending again on the position. And so things that people will look for, let's say, for example, specifically for medical devices, have you, what kind of design approach do you use? Do you do, bio design, or they call user-centric design in some cases? How familiar are you with the regs and standards? So ISO 13485. How familiar are you with the FDA regulations, etc.? This is a skill set that is pretty rare to find, and so it's a pretty big plus if you come with those things as in your back pocket as a source of knowledge, because it'll help you get up to speed a lot quicker. And then obviously, if you're joining as a data scientist or as a data analyst or software developer, it's again, how comfortable are you with working in for example, in a Scrum environment or an Agile environment? A lot of it again is past experience working in project type environments and how comfortable you are in working in those team type environments.
Stephanie?
And for me, obviously, I work for the government, so there's already a process, and you postal on the job, and you have time to forget that you apply for this job. So when you finally get a phone call for the government to get the interview, I will answer for an entry-level job. I think what's make the difference is your passion, because you do your bachelor in engineering, and that's great. Some of people have done some internship, and that's great too, but basically everybody is on the same level. So I think when you speak with the interviewer and you're really passionate about what you want and what's your goal, I think it's really what's make the difference between you and the exact other student that just graduate. So I think, you really need to show it. And I never hire someone, but I ask my boss, what did you hire me? And he say, I think on your resume, you speak a lot about cardiology stuff. And when I interview, you ask me about a lot of questions about how your job is, what is a typical day. And I think you were really passionate, and I see in you that I can make you grow through the company and through the process. So he hired me for this. So I guess that's the tricks.
That's interesting. That brings up an interesting idea. As you say, what differentiates you from the student that just graduated right next to you? Would you guys all agree that when you're sending out the resume, or when you receive resumes, you're likely to receive some permutation of the same skill sets whenever it's coming in for the job? And so then if that's the case, what can then differentiate you, right? Is it, like, as you say right now, you said passion, right? Like your passion for something and your engagement in the interview process. That obviously was a very important thing. Would you guys agree with that as well?
Yeah, so passion is that. I think you summarize it up really well, Stephanie. Sometimes that passion also translates to things that you can place on your resume, and that to me comes to extracurricular activities. So the curriculum that everybody goes through, though different for different universities, won't be necessarily the hard differentiator. One of the recent hires had done a lot of work and had traveled to third world countries to make 3D prosthetic arms for somebody, for people. And so he ran that group, and this is something he did off to the side whilst going through his engineering degree. And so that is a huge differentiator. It's not normal. Not everybody that works at Starfish has done something like that, but it certainly points towards a passion and motivation and extracurricular activities beyond what would be necessarily be on a resume. The other one that I always look at is what you do in your spare time. So, you know, if you are somebody that that does very detail-oriented work in your spare time as your hobby, then you're probably going to like doing that in your day-to-day job and activities as well. If you were competing at a really high level in a team sport, you probably really like competing or working with teams as well. So those are two things beyond, though important, the bulk of the curriculum that to me help differentiate.
I just want to add something. The hardest question I got in interview is, yeah, everybody know the COVID and everything, but how do you spend your day during the pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
So I say, okay, let's think about that.
Yeah. Not, you didn't say watching Netflix for 7 hours, right?
No.
Probably baking sour bread.
Yes, we bring sour bread. All right. So okay, we still got 19 minutes. That's great. Okay, so for the undergraduate students that are here, imagine we've piqued their interest for consulting. What should they start thinking about right now? What do you think is something that they should be looking into at their university or paying closer attention to? That sort of thing. We can start with you, Mark Derlick.
Co-ops. Majority of the people that Starfish hires have done a co-op, and I'll say this to the group here: Starfish doesn't post co-op positions. One of the key differentiators is if you show the initiative to apply and you figure out who you should be applying to, then you know that's a big leg up. And co-ops are also a really great way for companies to assess somebody without committing to somebody, and that works both ways, because maybe consulting isn't for you, but you've done 4 months and that was a good work experience. Yeah, that's the number one thing that I would always tell people.
Mark?
I'd say two things. Maybe number one, try to figure out what kind of consulting interests you. So whether it's management consulting or engineering consulting, design, or financial services, etc. Because all of these have very different. It's all consulting at the end of the day, but it's also very different day-to-day work, and each of these will require a different level of prep to join. The second thing then I'll say is kind of get varying and diverse work experience. It's not because you want to join a management consulting firm that you have to just join all the management consulting clubs and then do an investment banking internship or join a bank, etc. On the other hand, I think what is interesting when you join a consulting firm is having a broad variety of experiences and coming with a distinctive background in something, so that you're not just another profile on a piece of paper.
And for me, it will be always like knock at some door, ask people, speak with people. I did a co-op degree too, but I never go on a job that's my university post for me. I always go around to get the job that I want. So with the time, I know people that know people that know people that know people. So I think that's the best to do.
Agreed. Absolutely.
That's something I would add to that myself too. Is networking is everything. Create relationships. Speak to everybody. Doesn't matter where you are or what level you are. Speak to them. Okay, so let's kick into a little bit about the opportunities as you see it in the field right now. So coming out of a biomedical engineering background, what kind of opportunities do you see out there at the moment on the consulting side, and how do you see that expanding or growing? You want to take this one, Mark Shalala?
So I mean, consulting is interesting in a time like we are right now, is because you'll have both the clients that are seeing incredible growth like they've never seen before. Like you can go and ask any telemedicine company and they'll tell you this is the best time of their lives. Same thing for companies selling ventilators, or doing box builds for those ventilators, etc. So you'll have a lot of that on the uphill, but you also see companies that are not selling as much. Your orthopedic implants companies are not doing as well. And obviously, when we're talking about non-medical device, that's even a different issue. But by and large, right now with COVID and the pandemic, the medical device industry is seeing a boom. There's a lot of products that are seeing multiple increases in their demand, which is leading to more demand on consultants, not just from, again, product development, product design, but how do we triple our production? How do we lean out our operations? How do we restructure our supply chains? And so there is a demand on consultants. The one thing that I'd say is, whereas this is true of the medical devices industry, the way it reflects onto consultants is also dependent on the client. Some of them will try to kind of preserve money and try to do it internally, in which case you might see more jobs working for those OEMs, working for those companies rather than for a consulting firm. Whereas for consulting firms, we really, depends on how many contracts we have going on. And I'll tell you that it's been very wavy. So there is uncertainty, but out of all the places there is uncertainty, and I think the medical device industry is in one of the better spots right now.
Stephanie, is that the same? Like you're with the government, yes? So do you find that to be the same there?
Yeah, in fact, we grow and like keep it. In fact, hospitals right now are in urgent needs, and some of them just wake up with a pandemic. I don't know how they react, but they just react now for the second wave. So we are doing overtime like every week. So I guess, yeah, we are like pretty good right now.
And Mark?
Yeah, my answers are heavily swayed on the impacts that COVID has had on the industry as well. And I echo what you're saying, Mark and Stephanie. There's lots of growth in some areas and less in others. I think as companies are looking to grow and expand and accelerate, or companies that have just started and secured their funding in March and April, they're less inclined to go through the process of hiring to build out a team when there's less certainty, because who knows what things are going to look like 6 months from now. And so there's less commitment with the consulting firm, and the retained knowledge is still kept within the consulting firm. So if you need to take a break for 3 months, you can still come back, and those same people are still gainfully employed in the consulting firm. So we've seen a lot of growth just specifically from that. And then in March and April, we saw 30% of most of the prospects just disappear because they wanted to retain and weren't sure. But in general, things have been growing, and in specific areas, and consulting, I would say, will remain strong. What did that look like a year from now? I don't know.
Fair. All right, guys, we got 7 minutes left here. So I'm going to get into the Q&A. We got a few questions from our attendees here. This one here about regulation. So regulation has come up a lot in this conversation. When do you think, in coming in your career, do you need to be very, very familiar with regulations? How important is that to be very, very familiar with regulations as you step into a role or apply for a role? Start with you, Stephanie.
Personally, I got a class on the regulation, so I passed all the medical regulation in my class with my teacher. And after that, with my first internship, I dive in. So I used regulation every day for every step that I'm doing. It's really, really important in the medical field. So I guess, yeah, there's one particularly, I think it's the 13485. And yeah, you really need to know the basic in this regulation.
Mark Shalala?
And I'd also be interested to hear what Mark has to say on this. But from my perspective, I'd say we don't necessarily have an expectation that someone needs to know the regulation when we hire them, just because it's something that the best place to learn about 13485 and to learn about your FDA regulations, your CE mark, is on your first job. Each company will have their quality management system that is basically an interpretation of those regulations. But that said, if you do have that experience, it is a big plus, because it's not something that I was taught at McGill or in my classes. I ended up taking a class in it at Hopkins. But it's one thing to know how to do CAD, how to do design, but how you're supposed to document it, how you're supposed to create your traceability from design inputs all the way to your verification is a necessary skill in this industry. And it is something that is very highly transferable and very coveted.
I was going to answer it that I think really strong designers with a really strong background in regulatory are sort of like unicorns. They don't really exist, and I say that a little bit for the people that we see coming in, with rare exceptions. So Starfish is more than willing to hire somebody that looks like a horse. I'm going to stop with this analogy and help them grow a horn. But the more that you know coming in, I think that the benefit is that you're going to retain more of that knowledge. You're going to be able to apply. You're going to be able to contextualize it, right? So coursework is awesome. Coursework and practicing it through design a number of times is what's going to make you a better engineer that is familiar with the regulatory standards that are out there. And a lot of the fundamentals, in my opinion, that are imposed by the FDA or Health Canada are generally just good design practices. Thinking about the risk to patients, to users, making sure you're mandating the requirements, figuring out how to mold those into specifications that you can test, and then validating that out into the market are all things that should be natural to good designers, but the context and the nomenclature and the requirements from a testing standards are not things that people are necessarily going to know. So yeah, hopefully that unicorn analogy.
If I just add one thing also, because I think I saw in the question was like, how do you acquire that knowledge? I mean, there's a lot of online courses if you want to. You can also just go on the FDA website and read them, but just going to be honest, it's just boring. You don't want to do that. It's very, very detailed, very legalese, and it's not really a lot of fun. Maybe the best way in a school environment to do that is if you do have a design project and you are designing a medical device. That's like one thing I wish I had done in my capstone. I didn't know what classification my device was, and like only 3 years later I knew like, oh, that was going to be a class 3 PMA device, and we were just designing it as if it was an out of the garage startup, which would have never worked now that I know this. And so at the very basic, just knowing a bit like what's the level of risk of your device and what's the classification, I think is the bare minimum that you would look at, and then let your first job teach you about the more boring stuff.
There's a good question here. It kind of links into another one, so we'll call this a two-part question. So what advice would you give to somebody who is just about to graduate? And so do you think that they should apply for consulting positions right away, or do you think that industry is a must-have, like industry experience is a must-have before you step into a consulting role? Stephanie, you want to begin?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's help you if you have some experience in a medical device when you go for a consulting job, but that's not impossible to start with a consulting job and just learn from the scratch with experience. I guess when you're an engineer, you never really know what you're doing, so you need to learn each field, and you need to get time and get experience on what you do. So both is possible. For me, I have a lot of experience in the medical field in general, so I know how a hospital is running and that stuff. So it's helped me a lot with consulting field. But I guess, yeah, I guess you can go by consulting first, but it could help you if you have some experience in medical device engineering.
And Mark Derlick?
Yeah, I would encourage anybody that really wants to get into consulting to drive towards that as a passion. So it's not a mandated requirement. As with anything, more experience will benefit the probabilities. But yeah, no, I don't think that there's any specific mandate to have worked in another product company or another consulting firm.
All right, and Mark?
I'd say it depends on how technical you want to be. If you just want to do, again, from a management consulting standpoint, just want to do strategy and maybe some corporate finance, etc., maybe not as necessary. If you'd rather, you know, do design or do operations, etc., obviously a bit of background there is helpful. You can also acquire it at McKinsey. The reason I'm saying this is, again, you know, at McKinsey, we're not a dedicated medical devices consulting business. If you already know from the get-go that you want to be doing, you know, medical devices development, I recommend you find a place where you know you're going to acquire this experience before you jump into an environment that's a bit more broad and unstructured as ours is.
All right, that brings us to time. Perfectly, spot on, like engineers do. So yeah, I wanted to thank everybody for taking part in this, and I will hand it back over to Brenda.
Hello. Thank you guys all once again to our amazing panelists and our moderator. This is such an important panel for us to have, because I think this is something that a lot of students in engineering